The gunshot wound in Nathan Kane's side burned like hellfire itself, and he knew with absolute certainty that this dusty stretch of Nebraska prairie would become his grave before the sun set on another day. Blood soaked through his shirt, spreading dark and wet across the faded blue fabric, and his horse had thrown him 3 miles back when a rattlesnake spooked her into a frenzy. Now he crawled, inch by agonizing inch, toward a cluster of rocks that might provide some shade, some dignity, some final resting place better than dying face down in the dirt like a dog. The August heat of 1878 pressed down on him with merciless intensity, and buzzards already circled overhead, patient and knowing. He had been riding toward North Platte, Nebraska, carrying a bank deposit for the cattle ranch where he had worked the past 2 years. The O'Malley spread was one of the largest in the territory, and Nathan had earned the owner's trust through hard work and honest dealing. But 3 men had ambushed him at dawn, faces covered with bandanas, guns drawn and intentions clear. He had fought back, killed one of them, maybe wounded another, but took a bullet for his trouble. They had scattered when he refused to go down easy, probably thinking he would bleed out before reaching help. They were right. Nathan collapsed against the rocks, his vision swimming with black spots that grew larger with each passing moment. His canteen was long gone, lost when the horse bolted. His gun had 2 bullets left, though his hand shook too badly to aim worth a damn. 26 years old, and this was how it ended. No wife, no children, no legacy beyond a modest savings account at the North Platte Bank, and a reputation as a reliable ranch hand. His mother back in Kansas City would grieve, but she had 6 other children to occupy her heart. His father had been dead 5 years, killed in a mining accident. The sun climbed higher, a merciless white disk in an endlessly blue sky. Nathan's breathing came in shallow gasps now, and he could feel his pulse weakening, growing irregular. He thought about water, about cool streams and spring rains and the way beer tasted after a long day's work. He thought about Sarah Mitchell, the schoolteacher who had smiled at him during church services, and how he had been too shy to speak more than a dozen words to her. He thought about all the things he would never do, never see, never experience. Then he heard the wagon. At first, he thought it was a hallucination, his dying brain conjuring false hope. But the sound grew louder, unmistakable. Wooden wheels creaking, a horse's steady hoofbeats, someone humming a hymn slightly off-key. Nathan tried to call out, but his voice emerged as nothing more than a croak. He fumbled for his gun, managed to fire 1 shot into the air, the recoil nearly knocking the weapon from his trembling hand. The wagon sound stopped. "Hello," a woman's voice called out, clear and strong. "Who's there? Are you in trouble?" Nathan tried to respond, managed only a wheeze. He heard footsteps approaching quickly, and then a figure appeared above him, silhouetted against the brutal sun. As his eyes focused, he saw a woman in her early 20s, dark hair pulled back in a practical bun, wearing a simple calico dress and a canvas apron. Her face was sun-bronzed and dotted with freckles, her green eyes wide with concern. "Oh, my Lord," she breathed, dropping to her knees beside him. Her hands moved quickly, efficiently, pulling his shirt aside to examine the wound. "You have been shot. When did this happen?" "Dawn," Nathan managed to whisper. 3, maybe 4 hours ago. You have lost a great deal of blood." Her voice remained calm, clinical, even though her eyes betrayed her worry. "Can you stand if I help you? My wagon is just there, perhaps 20 yards. I have medical supplies, but we need to get you out of this sun." Nathan wanted to tell her it was pointless, that he was already dead, just too stubborn to stop breathing yet. But something in her eyes, in the set of her jaw, made him nod instead. She was not a large woman, perhaps 5.5 feet tall, but she moved with surprising strength as she got her shoulder under his arm and hauled him to his feet. The world spun violently, and he would have fallen if not for her steady grip. "Stay with me," she commanded, her voice brooking no argument. "One step, then another. You are not dying today, mister. I absolutely forbid it. The 20 yards might as well have been 20 miles. Each step sent fresh agony through Nathan's side, and twice he felt consciousness trying to slip away. But each time the woman's voice cut through the gathering darkness, sharp and insistent, pulling him back. "What is your name?" she demanded as they stumbled forward. "Nathan," he gasped. "Nathan Kane." "I am Florence Ashford. Keep talking to me, Nathan Kane. Where were you headed?" "North Platte. Bank deposit." "Were you robbed?" Fought back. "Good for you. Almost there now, just a few more steps." The wagon materialized before him like a ship emerging from fog. It was a modest affair, laden with crates and barrels, driven by a sturdy bay mare who watched their approach with mild interest. Florence helped him into the wagon bed, where she had already spread several blankets. The shade from the canvas cover felt like heaven. "Lie still," she ordered, already digging through a wooden chest. She emerged with clean cloth, a bottle of whiskey, a needle and thread, and various other medical supplies. "This is going to hurt considerably, but the bullet needs to come out and the wound must be cleaned." "Have you ever been shot before?" "No, madam." "Well, you are handling it better than most. I'm going to give you whiskey for the pain, but not too much because you have already lost blood and I need you conscious." She uncorked the bottle and held it to his lips. Nathan drank greedily, the alcohol burning down his throat. "That is enough. Now bite down on this." She handed him a leather strap, which he clamped between his teeth. Florence pushed his shirt up further, exposing the wound fully. It was a ragged hole in his left side, about 3 inches below his ribs, still seeping blood. She poured whiskey directly onto it, and Nathan's back arched as fire consumed him. The leather strap was all that kept him from screaming. "The bullet went through," Florence announced, relief evident in her voice. "That is very fortunate. If it had lodged inside, the surgery would be much more dangerous. I still need to clean the wound thoroughly and stitch both entry and exit. Try to stay as still as possible." Nathan wanted to ask how a young woman traveling alone through Nebraska knew how to treat gunshot wounds, but the question dissolved in another wave of agony as she began cleaning the wound with steady, practiced movements. Her hands never wavered, never hesitated, even when he groaned and thrashed involuntarily. She worked with the focused intensity of a battlefield surgeon, and gradually Nathan understood that she had done this before, probably many times. The stitching was its own special hell. Nathan felt each pass of the needle, each pull of the thread drawing torn flesh back together. Sweat poured down his face despite the shade, and his vision kept trying to tunnel down to nothing. But Florence's voice kept him anchored to consciousness, a steady stream of words that demanded his attention. "My father was a doctor," she explained as she worked. "I traveled with him for 5 years, serving as his nurse and assistant. We moved from town to town, wherever we were needed. He died last winter of pneumonia, and I have been continuing his work ever since. I was in a settlement 30 miles north, helping with a difficult childbirth. Mother and baby are both healthy, thank God. Now I am returning to North Platte, where I have been staying with my aunt." "Lucky," Nathan managed to say around the leather strap. "Lucky you found me." "I do not believe in luck," Florence replied, tying off another suture. "I believe in providence. You were meant to survive this, Nathan Kane, or I would not have come along this particular road at this particular time. Now hush and let me concentrate." When she finally finished, Nathan's side felt like it had been sewn together with barbed wire, but the bleeding had stopped. Florence bandaged the wound with clean linen, wrapping it around his torso with professional efficiency. Then she gave him another small sip of whiskey, followed by water from her canteen. The liquid was warm and tasted faintly of metal, but Nathan had never experienced anything more wonderful in his entire life. "You need rest and you need to stay still," Florence instructed, settling back on her heels. Her hands were stained with his blood, but her expression showed only satisfaction at a job well done. "I am going to drive us to North Platte. The journey will take several hours, and the wagon is not exactly a smooth ride, but you should survive it if your wound does not reopen. Do you understand?" "Yes, madam." "Stop calling me madam. I am 23 years old, not some ancient grandmother. Florence is perfectly acceptable." Despite everything, Nathan found himself almost smiling. "Yes, Florence." She nodded briskly, then climbed into the driver's seat. The wagon lurched into motion, and Nathan bit back a groan as the movement jostled his wound. He stared up at the canvas cover, watching it sway with the wagon's rhythm, and marveled at the strange turn his death day had taken. He was still alive, against all odds and expectations. And he owed that life to a sharp-tongued, green-eyed woman who treated bullet wounds with the same calm efficiency. Most women brought to darning socks. The journey was every bit as miserable as Florence had predicted. The wagon hit every rut and rock in the Nebraska prairie, each jolt sending fresh pain through Nathan's body. But Florence had tied him in place with careful knots, preventing him from rolling around and potentially tearing his stitches. She kept up a steady monologue from the driver's seat, telling him about the various towns she had visited with her father, the cases they had treated, the people they had helped. Nathan suspected she was talking primarily to keep him conscious, but he found himself genuinely interested in her stories. She spoke of delivering babies in snowstorms, setting broken bones, treating fevers and infections and injuries of every description. She spoke of the shortage of doctors in the frontier territories, how people often went years without proper medical care. She spoke of her father's dedication to his calling, how he had refused payment from patients who could not afford it, accepting chickens and vegetables and labor in trade instead. He believed medicine was a sacred trust, Florence said, her voice softening. That those with healing knowledge had an obligation to use it, regardless of circumstance or compensation. I try to honor that belief in my own work, though it makes financial stability rather challenging. "You are not married?" Nathan asked, surprising himself with the question. Florence laughed, the sound bright and unexpected. "What man would want a wife who disappears for days to deliver other women's babies and comes home covered in blood? Most men want wives who cook and clean and stay quietly at home. I am not exactly ideal marital material." "I think you are exactly ideal," Nathan murmured, then immediately wished he could take the words back. The blood loss and pain must have loosened his tongue beyond all propriety, but Florence did not seem offended. "You are delirious from trauma and blood loss," she said kindly. "When you recover, you will remember this conversation and be mortified. I will do us both the favor of pretending it never happened." They reached North Platte as the sun began its descent toward the western horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold. The town was larger than Nathan expected, with several streets of businesses and homes, a church with a proper steeple, and a hotel that looked almost respectable. Florence drove directly to a white-painted house on the edge of town, calling out as she pulled the wagon to a stop. "Aunt Margaret." "I need help. I have an injured man here." A woman in her 50s emerged from the house, wiping flour-dusted hands on her apron. She took one look into the wagon and sprang into immediate action. "Gunshot." "Yes." I removed the bullet and stitched him up, but he needs bed rest and monitoring for infection. Bring him inside. The spare room is ready." Between the two women, they managed to get Nathan out of the wagon and into the house. The spare room was small but clean, with a narrow bed and a window overlooking a vegetable garden. They laid him on crisp white sheets, and Nathan felt consciousness beginning to slip away for real now, the adrenaline that had sustained him finally exhausted. "Sleep," Florence instructed, her hand cool against his forehead. "I will check on you regularly. You are safe now, Nathan Kane." He wanted to thank her, to say something meaningful about how she had saved his life, but sleep dragged him down before the words could form. The next 3 days existed in a fever dream haze. Nathan drifted in and out of consciousness, sometimes waking to find Florence changing his bandages or coaxing water down his throat, other times waking to Aunt Margaret's gentle ministrations. The wound in his side burned and throbbed, but gradually the pain became less all-consuming, more manageable. Florence had been right about the risk of infection. On the second day, Nathan's temperature spiked dangerously high, and he thrashed in delirium, seeing visions of the ambush replayed endlessly, feeling the bullets strike again and again. Florence stayed by his bedside through that long night, keeping him cool with damp cloths, forcing him to drink water and willow bark tea, monitoring his wound for signs of rot. Nathan was barely aware of her presence, lost in fever dreams, but some part of him knew she was there, anchoring him to life when his body wanted to surrender. By the morning of the 4th day, the fever broke. Nathan woke to find sunlight streaming through the window and Florence asleep in a chair beside his bed, her head tilted at an uncomfortable angle, her dress rumpled. He watched her for a long moment, noting the dark circles under her eyes, the way her hand rested protectively on his blanket as if ready to fight death itself if it came calling again. "You should be in a proper bed," he said quietly. Florence's eyes opened immediately, instantly alert despite her obvious exhaustion. "You are awake, truly awake this time, not delirious. How do you feel?" "Like I was shot and spent 3 days dying." 4 days, actually, but you are not dying anymore, which is a significant improvement. She leaned forward, pressing her hand to his forehead. "Your fever is gone. That is excellent news. Are you hungry?" As if in answer, Nathan's stomach growled loudly. Florence smiled, the expression transforming her tired face into something radiant. "I will take that as a yes. Aunt Margaret has been making broth in anticipation of this moment. Stay here and do not move." She hurried from the room, and Nathan took the opportunity to examine himself. Someone had dressed him in a clean nightshirt, and his torso was wrapped in fresh bandages. He lifted the shirt carefully, peering at the dressing. No blood, no staining. A good sign. The wound still hurt, a deep ache that intensified when he moved, but it was nothing like the agony of that first day. Florence returned with a bowl of chicken broth and some soft bread. She helped Nathan sit up, propping pillows behind him, then handed him the bowl. He expected her to feed him like an invalid, but she simply watched as he managed it himself, though his hands shook slightly from weakness. "The sheriff wants to speak with you when you are well enough," Florence said as he ate. "I sent word about the ambush. He found your horse wandering near where you were shot. She is at the livery stable, safe and sound. The deposit bag was still in your saddlebag, unopened." "They did not care about the money," Nathan said slowly, pieces clicking together in his mind. "They wanted me dead specifically." Florence's eyes sharpened. "Why would someone want you dead?" "I do not know. I am nobody important, just a ranch hand." "You are important enough that someone hired killers. That is not a small thing, Nathan Kane. You should think carefully about who might benefit from your death." Nathan ate in silence, turning the question over in his mind. He had no enemies that he knew of, no debts or disputes or romantic entanglements that might provoke violence. He worked hard, kept to himself, caused no trouble. Yet someone had wanted him dead badly enough to pay for an ambush. Over the following week, Nathan's strength returned gradually. He progressed from bed to chair, then from chair to short walks around the house. Florence changed his bandages daily, her touch gentle but clinical, checking for any signs of infection or improper healing. Aunt Margaret, a widow who had lived alone since her husband's death a decade earlier, fussed over him constantly, bringing meals and extra blankets and books to occupy his time. The sheriff, a gruff man named Tom Barrett, came to take Nathan's statement. He listened carefully to the description of the ambush, made notes in a small leather book, and promised to investigate. One of the ambushers had been killed in the fight, the sheriff confirmed. The body had been identified as Jake Riley, a known outlaw with a history of robbery and assault. The other two had not been found, but the sheriff had contacts throughout the territory and would spread the word. Riley usually worked with his brother Clem and a fellow named Pike Harrison, Sheriff Barrett said, settling into his chair with a sigh. If I had to guess, those were your other two ambushers. They have been wanted for various crimes across 3 territories. But Riley specialized in robbery, not assassination. Someone must have paid him well to go after you specifically. But who? Nathan asked, frustrated. I am nobody. I have no money beyond my wages, no property, no enemies that I know of. Sometimes being nobody is exactly why someone wants you dead, the sheriff said cryptically. Maybe you saw something you were not supposed to see. Maybe you are standing in the way of something without realizing it. I will look into it, but you watch yourself, Kane. If they tried once, they might try again. That night, Nathan lay awake long after the household had gone to sleep, staring at the ceiling and trying to piece together the puzzle. What could he have seen? What could he know? His mind replayed the weeks before the ambush, looking for anything unusual, anything that might have marked him for death. And then he remembered. 2 weeks ago, he had been riding fence line in the far northern section of the O'Malley Ranch when he had come across a group of men butchering cattle. Not O'Malley cattle, but animals bearing the brand of the smaller neighboring ranch owned by Samuel Harper. The men had scattered when they saw him, leaving the half-butchered carcass behind. Nathan had reported the incident to his foreman, who had passed the information to Mr. O'Malley, who had supposedly reported it to the sheriff. But what if the information had never reached the sheriff? What if someone had intercepted it? Someone who was involved in the rustling operation. Nathan's blood ran cold. Cattle rustling was a hanging offense, and rustlers had killed for less than a witness who could identify them. If the operation was large enough, organized enough, there could be significant money at stake. Enough to justify hiring killers to eliminate a troublesome cowboy. He needed to tell the sheriff, but he also needed proof. Accusations without evidence would accomplish nothing except possibly alerting the real criminals. Nathan filed the theory away, determined to investigate further once he was well enough to move freely. Meanwhile, his relationship with Florence developed in unexpected ways. She checked on him multiple times each day, monitoring his recovery with professional care. But increasingly, their conversations extended beyond medical concerns. They talked about their childhoods, their dreams, their philosophies on life and death, and everything in between. Florence described growing up on the road with her doctor father, learning medicine through observation and practice rather than formal schooling. Nathan told her about his own upbringing in Kansas City, the son of a miner who had always encouraged his children to seek better lives than his own. "Why did you come to Nebraska?" Florence asked one afternoon as she changed his bandages. The wound was healing cleanly now, the stitches holding firm, new pink skin growing to close the gap. "My father died in a mining accident when I was 21, Nathan explained. It was sudden, brutal, entirely preventable if the company had maintained proper safety standards. I could not bear to stay in Kansas City after that, could not bear to watch my mother's grief every single day. I felt like a coward for leaving, but I also felt like I would suffocate if I stayed." "That is not cowardice," Florence said firmly. "That is survival. Sometimes we need distance from our pain in order to process it properly. What about you? Why are you still traveling, still practicing medicine? You could settle in one place, establish a proper practice." Florence was quiet for a long moment, her hand stilling on the bandage. "I am afraid," she said finally. "Afraid that if I stop moving, I will have to confront how much I miss my father. Afraid that settling down means accepting that part of my life is truly over. When I am traveling, treating patients, I can pretend I am still working alongside him. I can pretend he is just in the next town, waiting for me to catch up." Nathan reached out without thinking, covering her hand with his own. "He would be proud of you. The work you are doing, the lives you are saving. You honor his memory with every patient you help." Florence looked down at their joined hands, her expression unreadable. Then she pulled away gently, finishing the bandage with brisk efficiency. "You are healing well. Another week and you should be able to return to normal activities, though I would recommend avoiding gunfights for the foreseeable future." She left quickly after that, and Nathan cursed himself for overstepping. He had no claim on Florence Ashford, no right to offer comfort or hold her hand. She had saved his life, and he was repaying her kindness by developing feelings entirely inappropriate to their circumstances. She was educated, skilled, independent. He was a ranch hand with a 6th-grade education and a bullet hole in his side. The social distance between them was vast, probably unbridgeable. But over the next few days, Nathan noticed a change in Florence's demeanor. She lingered longer during her visits, talking about inconsequential things, laughing at his terrible jokes. She brought him books from her aunt's collection and stayed to discuss them. She taught him to play chess on a battered board that had belonged to her late uncle. And sometimes, when she thought he was not looking, he caught her watching him with an expression that made his heart race. 10 days after the ambush, Nathan was well enough to venture outside. He walked slowly, testing his limits with Florence hovering nearby like a worried mother hen. The wound pulled uncomfortably when he moved, but it held. He was going to live, truly and completely, and the realization filled him with profound gratitude. "I owe you my life," he said as they walked through Aunt Margaret's garden. "I do not know how to repay that debt." "There is no debt," Florence replied. "You needed help and I provided it. That is not a transaction requiring repayment. Still, without you, I would be buzzard food on the prairie." "Then perhaps you should live well," Florence suggested. "Make your life mean something. That would be payment enough." Nathan stopped walking, turning to face her. The setting sun painted the sky behind her in shades of purple and gold, and her face was soft in the gentle light. "What if I want to make my life mean something by spending it with you?" Florence's eyes widened, her breath catching audibly. "Nathan, you cannot possibly know what you are saying. You are grateful, and gratitude can feel like love when emotions are heightened by trauma. But once you return to your normal life, once time has passed, you will realize these feelings are not real." "They feel real to me right now," Nathan insisted. "I have never felt anything more real in my entire life. You saved me, Florence, but not just from dying. You saved me from a life of simply existing without purpose or passion or connection. You made me want to be more than just another cowboy drifting from ranch to ranch. I am not some magical cure for an aimless life, Florence said, but her voice shook slightly. I am just a woman doing the work I was trained to do. You are not just anything. You are extraordinary. You are brilliant and brave and so beautiful it makes my chest ache. And I think, maybe, you feel something for me too. Florence turned away, her shoulders tense. Even if I did, what future could we possibly have? I need to travel to practice medicine wherever I am needed. You have responsibilities at your ranch. Our lives are fundamentally incompatible. Then we make them compatible, Nathan said. I am not chained to the O'Malley Ranch. I have skills that transfer. I can find work wherever you need to go or help you establish a permanent practice somewhere. Life is full of possibilities, Florence. We just have to be brave enough to reach for them. She was quiet for a long time, and Nathan held his breath, afraid he had pushed too hard, afraid he had ruined everything. Then Florence turned back to him, and there were tears in her green eyes. I am terrified, she whispered. I have never let myself want this, never let myself imagine a life that included love and partnership. It seemed impossible, a distraction from the work I needed to do. But you make me want impossible things, Nathan Kane. You make me want to stay in one place and build a life instead of constantly running from my grief. Nathan stepped closer, close enough to see the gold flecks in her eyes, close enough to smell the lavender soap she used. Then stay. Build that life with me. We can figure out the details as we go. You are supposed to be resting and recovering, not making dramatic declarations, Florence said, but she was smiling through her tears. I will rest after you agree to give us a chance, Nathan countered. Until then, I am going to stand here and be hopelessly romantic. Florence laughed, the sound bright and full of joy. You are impossible. Is that a yes? It is a maybe, Florence said, but she reached out and took his hand, lacing her fingers through his. A very strong maybe. Nathan squeezed her hand gently, careful not to upset his balance and reopen his wound. They stood together in the garden as the sun disappeared below the horizon, and stars began to emerge in the darkening sky. It was not a perfect moment because perfect moments did not exist. But it was real and honest and full of possibility, and that was better than perfection could ever be. The next morning, Nathan reported his theory about the rustling operation to Sheriff Barrett. The lawman listened carefully, his expression growing grave. That would explain a few things, Barrett said. Harper has been losing cattle regularly, far more than can be explained by natural predation or simple theft. And you are right that organized rustling requires organization and protection. If someone at the O'Malley Ranch is involved, that would provide perfect cover. I do not want to believe anyone at the ranch would be part of it, Nathan said. These are men I have worked alongside for 2 years, but I also cannot ignore the facts. Leave the investigation to me, Barrett instructed. You focus on healing. If these rustlers realize you have connected the dots, they might try again. Stay here in town where I can keep an eye on you. Nathan agreed reluctantly, though the inactivity chafed at him. He was a man accustomed to long days of hard work, and being confined to Aunt Margaret's house felt like a different kind of prison. Florence, sensing his restlessness, began including him in her daily activities. He accompanied her on house calls around town, carrying her medical bag and watching as she treated various ailments. He saw firsthand her skill and compassion, the way she put patients at ease with her matter-of-fact manner and gentle humor. He also saw how desperately the town needed her services. North Platte had no resident doctor, and people had been making do with home remedies and prayer. Florence's arrival had filled a critical gap, but her plan to keep traveling meant that gap would reopen the moment she left. Have you ever considered staying here permanently? Nathan asked one evening as they walked back from treating a child's broken arm. North Platte needs a doctor, and you clearly have the skills. I have considered it, Florence admitted. Aunt Margaret has offered me her home as a base for a practice. But I worry about the people in smaller settlements who have even less access to medical care. If I settle here, who will help them? You cannot save everyone, Nathan said gently. You will burn yourself out trying. Maybe it is better to provide excellent care to one community than scattered care to many. Florence looked thoughtful but did not respond immediately. Nathan let the subject drop, not wanting to pressure her. This had to be her decision, made for her own reasons, not because he wanted her to stay. A week later, Sheriff Barrett arrived at Aunt Margaret's house with news. We found the rustling operation, he announced. It was even bigger than we suspected. The O'Malley Ranch foreman, Jack Sullivan, was running the whole operation. He had men butchering stolen cattle and selling the meat to various businesses throughout the territory. Harper was not the only victim. At least 6 smaller ranchers were being systematically robbed. Sullivan, Nathan felt sick. He had worked directly under Sullivan for 2 years, had trusted the man, respected him. Are you certain? We caught him red-handed with stolen livestock. He confessed to everything, including hiring Riley to kill you. He knew you had seen his operation, and feared you would eventually put the pieces together and testify against him. He is in custody now, along with 3 others involved in the scheme. You will need to testify at the trial, but you are safe now. Relief flooded through Nathan, followed quickly by anger. Sullivan's greed had nearly cost Nathan his life, had put Florence in danger by association. When is the trial? 3 weeks. The circuit judge will be here then. Your testimony will be crucial to securing convictions. After the sheriff left, Nathan found Florence in the garden, tending to Aunt Margaret's tomato plants. He told her the news and she listened quietly, her hands stilling in the dirt. I am glad you are safe, she said finally. I am glad justice will be served. But I am also aware that this changes things between us. Why would it change things? Because you are no longer in immediate danger, because you will return to your normal life soon and I will return to mine. This interlude has been wonderful, Nathan, but interludes end. Nathan knelt beside her in the dirt, ignoring the twinge from his mostly healed wound. It does not have to end. I meant what I said, Florence. I want to build a life with you. I have been offered a position, Florence said quietly. A doctor in Colorado has a large practice and wants an associate. He wrote to my aunt, knowing of my work. It is an excellent opportunity. Nathan's heart sank, but he forced himself to speak calmly. Is that what you want, to work in Colorado? I do not know what I want, Florence admitted. I thought I did. I thought I wanted to keep traveling, keep helping people, keep running from my grief. But being here in North Platte, establishing relationships with patients, having a home base with Aunt Margaret, it has made me realize how much I miss stability. And meeting you has made me realize how much I have been denying myself by refusing to consider love or partnership. Then do not deny yourself, Nathan urged. Choose what makes you happy, not what you think you should do. Florence turned to face him fully, her green eyes searching his face. What makes me happy is you, she said softly. Against all logic and reason, what makes me happy is the thought of staying here, building a practice, building a life with you. But I am terrified of making that choice and then regretting it, of wondering what I gave up. You are not giving anything up, Nathan insisted. You will still practice medicine, still help people. You will just do it from one place instead of many, and you will do it with someone who loves you standing beside you. Florence inhaled sharply. You love me, completely. Utterly. Since the moment you hauled me into your wagon and told me you forbade me to die." Tears spilled down Florence's cheeks, but she was smiling. "I love you too. I tried not to. I told myself it was just proximity and drama and the intensity of nearly losing you. But it is real, Nathan. This feeling is real." Nathan pulled her close, mindful of his healing wound, and kissed her. It was their first kiss, soft and tentative and full of promise. Florence's hands came up to frame his face, her touch gentle, and when they finally pulled apart, both were breathless. "Stay," Nathan whispered against her forehead. "Stay in North Platte. Open your practice. Let me court you properly the way you deserve. Let us see where this goes without the shadow of death and danger hanging over us." "Yes," Florence said simply. "Yes to all of it." The next 3 weeks passed in a blur of preparation. Florence wrote to the Colorado doctor, politely declining his offer and explaining her decision to establish a practice in North Platte. Aunt Margaret was overjoyed, immediately offering to convert her front parlor into an examination room. Nathan, cleared by Sheriff Barrett to return to work, discovered that Mr. O'Malley wanted to promote him to foreman to replace the traitorous Sullivan. The position came with better pay and a small house on the ranch property. "Though I hear you might have other living arrangements in mind," O'Malley said with a knowing smile. "The whole town is talking about you and the lady doctor." Nathan felt his face heat. "We are courting, sir, properly." "Good for you, son. She is a remarkable woman. You treat her right." The trial proceeded smoothly. Sullivan and his accomplices were found guilty of cattle rustling and attempted murder. Sullivan received 20 years in prison. The others received varying sentences. Nathan's testimony was clear and damning, and he felt no guilt watching the men who had tried to kill him being led away in chains. Justice had been served. After the trial, Nathan threw himself into his new role as foreman while simultaneously courting Florence with determined intensity. He brought her flowers from the prairie, took her on picnic lunches by the Platte River, attended church services faithfully so they could sit together. Florence's medical practice grew rapidly as word spread of her skills. She treated everything from minor injuries to serious illnesses, and gradually people stopped referring to her as the lady doctor and simply called her Doc Ashford. On a cool October evening, 6 months after the ambush that had brought them together, Nathan took Florence back to the spot where she had found him. He had marked it with a small cairn of stones, a memorial to the moment his life had changed forever. "Why are we here?" Florence asked, confused. Nathan took her hands, his heart pounding. "Because this is where I died and was reborn. This is where I met you, where you saved me, where everything that matters in my life began. And I wanted to come back here to ask you something important." He lowered himself carefully to one knee, pulling a small velvet box from his pocket. Florence's hands flew to her mouth, her eyes going wide. "Florence Ashford, you are the bravest, kindest, most brilliant person I have ever known. You saved my life in every way a person can be saved. Will you marry me? Will you let me spend the rest of my life showing you how much you mean to me?" "Yes," Florence breathed, tears streaming down her face. "Yes, absolutely yes." Nathan slipped the ring onto her finger, a simple gold band with a small emerald that matched her eyes. It had cost him nearly all his savings, but it was worth every penny to see the joy on her face. They kissed there in the fading light, in the place where death had been defeated and love had taken root. They married in December, in the North Platte church with half the town in attendance. Florence wore a cream-colored dress that had belonged to her mother, and Nathan wore a new suit purchased specifically for the occasion. Aunt Margaret cried through the entire ceremony, as did Nathan's mother, who had traveled from Kansas City with several of Nathan's siblings. Sheriff Barrett stood as Nathan's best man, and the pastor's wife stood up for Florence. The reception was held at the town hall, with food and music and dancing that lasted well into the night. Nathan had never been much of a dancer, but Florence taught him patiently, laughing when he stepped on her feet, guiding him through the steps until he found the rhythm. They danced their first dance as husband and wife to a fiddle tune that was probably too fast for the occasion, but neither of them cared. They moved into the foreman's house, a small but sturdy building with 2 bedrooms, a kitchen, and a sitting room. Florence converted 1 bedroom into an office where she could see patients during evening hours, complementing her practice at Aunt Margaret's house. Nathan built her shelves for her medical books and supplies, constructed a proper examination table, did everything he could to support her work. Their first year of marriage was not without challenges. Nathan's work as foreman was demanding, requiring long hours and difficult decisions. Florence's practice grew to the point where she was often exhausted, falling asleep over dinner from sheer fatigue. They learned to navigate disagreements, to communicate when stress made them short-tempered, to support each other through the inevitable difficulties of building a life together. But they also found deep joy in the everyday moments. Morning coffee shared before dawn, discussing their plans for the day. Evening walks along the river, hands linked, talking about everything and nothing. Quiet nights reading together by lamplight, Florence studying medical journals while Nathan worked through books on ranch management. The comfort of falling asleep together and waking up beside each other, day after day, building a rhythm and routine that felt like home. In their second year of marriage, Florence discovered she was pregnant. The news brought both excitement and anxiety. Florence had helped deliver dozens of babies, but had never imagined carrying one herself. Nathan was alternately thrilled and terrified, suddenly hyper-aware of all the dangers facing expectant mothers and infants. "I am a doctor," Florence reminded him gently when he tried to wrap her in cotton wool. "I know what to expect and how to manage my own care. You need to trust me." "I do trust you," Nathan said. "But I also love you more than life itself, and the thought of anything happening to you makes me lose all rational thought." Florence softened, taking his hands. "Nothing is going to happen to me. I am healthy and strong, and I have medical knowledge on my side. We are going to have a baby, Nathan. We are going to be parents. Let yourself be happy about that." Their son was born on a warm May evening in 1880 after a labor that lasted 12 hours. Nathan stayed by Florence's side through all of it, holding her hand, bringing her water, supporting her through the contractions. When the baby finally arrived, red-faced and squalling, Nathan wept openly, overwhelmed by the miracle of new life. They named him Thomas James Kane, after Nathan's father and Florence's father. Tommy was a healthy baby with his mother's green eyes and his father's dark hair. He transformed their lives completely, demanding attention at all hours, filling their small house with noise and chaos and indescribable love. Florence continued her medical practice, bringing Tommy along on house calls in a basket carrier that Nathan had crafted. The townspeople adored seeing Doc Ashford with her baby, and Tommy grew up surrounded by the whole community's affection. Nathan took to fatherhood with unexpected ease, comfortable with the practical aspects of caring for an infant, patient with the sleepless nights and constant demands. 2 years later, their daughter arrived. Caroline Florence Kane was born on a snowy January morning, her birth easier and faster than her brother's. She had her father's brown eyes and her mother's determined chin, and from the moment she could crawl, she was into everything. Tommy, now a solemn 2-year-old, appointed himself her protector, watching over her with endearing seriousness. As their children grew, Nathan and Florence settled into the kind of deep partnership that came from weathering life's challenges together. They celebrated triumphs and mourned losses, supported each other's work, and built a home filled with love and laughter. Nathan advanced in his career, eventually purchasing a small ranch of his own with savings carefully accumulated over years. Florence's medical practice became one of the most respected in the region, and she began training younger women interested in nursing and midwifery, passing on the knowledge her father had given her. On their 10th anniversary, Nathan took Florence back to the cairn of stones on the prairie. They had visited it every year, a tradition they both cherished. But this time, they brought Tommy and Caroline along, now 8 and 6 years old respectively. "This is where I met your mother," Nathan told the children, who listened with wide eyes. "I was dying and she saved me. Everything good in my life started right here in this spot." "Mama saved you?" Tommy asked, clearly impressed. "She did indeed. Your mother is a hero." Florence laughed, shaking her head. "I am not a hero. I am just a doctor who happened to be in the right place at the right time." "You are my hero," Nathan said, pulling her close. "Then, now, always." They stood together as a family, looking out over the vast Nebraska prairie. The land stretched endlessly in all directions, golden grass waving in the wind, sky so blue it almost hurt to look at. It was harsh country, unforgiving and beautiful in equal measure. But it was home, and Nathan could not imagine being anywhere else. 25 years after the ambush that had changed everything, Nathan and Florence celebrated their silver anniversary surrounded by family and friends. Their children were grown now, Tommy working alongside Nathan on the ranch, Caroline studying medicine at a women's college back east, determined to follow in her mother's footsteps. There were grandchildren too, 3 so far with more likely to come. The anniversary celebration was held at their ranch house, larger now than the modest foreman's cottage where they had started. The house had grown along with their family, with additions built as needs changed and resources allowed. It was not fancy, but it was comfortable and warm, filled with the accumulation of decades of shared life. As the party wound down and guests departed, Nathan and Florence found themselves alone on the porch, watching the sunset paint the western sky in brilliant colors. Nathan's hair was now more gray than brown, and Florence had laugh lines at the corners of her eyes, but to him, she was exactly as beautiful as she had been that day on the prairie when she had pulled him back from death's edge. "You ever regret it?" Nathan asked quietly. "Staying here instead of traveling, building a practice here instead of going to Colorado?" Florence turned to him, her green eyes still as sharp and clear as ever. "Not for a single moment. This life with you, with our children and grandchildren, with my work and our community, it is everything I never knew I wanted. You gave me that, Nathan. You gave me permission to stop running and start living. You gave me life itself," Nathan replied. "Everything after that day has been a gift." They sat together in comfortable silence as the stars began to emerge, one by one, in the darkening sky. Somewhere in the distance, a coyote called, and cattle lowed in response. The wind carried the scent of grass and dust and home. Nathan thought back to that August day in 1878, to the certain knowledge that he was dying alone on the prairie. He thought about the gunshot wound, the pain, the despair. And he thought about the sound of wagon wheels, a woman's voice calling out, strong hands pulling him back from the edge of eternity. He had thought his story was ending that day. Instead, it had just begun. Everything that mattered, everything that made life worth living, had grown from those desperate moments when Florence Ashford had refused to let him die. She had saved his body first, and then, slowly and surely, she had saved his heart and soul as well. What are you thinking about?" Florence asked, leaning her head against his shoulder. "I am thinking that dying on the prairie was the best thing that ever happened to me," Nathan said, "because it brought you into my life." Florence laughed, the sound bright and full of joy. "Only you could find the silver lining in being shot and left for dead." "The silver lining is sitting right next to me," Nathan said, kissing her forehead. "And she is worth every bullet wound, every moment of pain, every brush with death. I would do it all again in a heartbeat if it meant ending up here with you." "Well, let us not make a habit of you getting shot," Florence said dryly. "Once was quite enough drama for one lifetime." "Agreed, though I make no promises about the drama. Life with you has been many things, but it has never been boring." They sat together until the last light faded from the sky and the stars shone in their full glory above the Nebraska prairie. Inside the house, they could hear their granddaughter singing softly, Tommy's wife laughing at some joke. The sounds of family, of life continuing across generations, of love that had started with one desperate rescue and grown into something vast and enduring. Nathan Kane had thought he was dying on a dusty stretch of prairie in the summer of 1878. Instead, he had been reborn, pulled back from the edge by a stubborn, brilliant woman who refused to let death claim him. And in the decades since, he had lived more fully and loved more deeply than he had ever imagined possible. As they finally rose to go inside, Nathan took Florence's hand, their fingers interlacing automatically after 25 years of practice. Some love stories began with grand gestures and dramatic declarations. Theirs had begun with blood and pain and a woman's determination to save a dying stranger. But it had grown into something beautiful and lasting, a testament to the power of compassion, courage, and the simple choice to keep fighting for life and love, no matter the odds. The house welcomed them with warmth and light, and the voices of the people they loved most in the world. And as Nathan closed the door behind them, shutting out the night and the prairie wind, he offered a silent prayer of gratitude for bullet wounds and stubborn women and second chances at life. Because sometimes, dying was just the beginning of learning how to truly live.